Hey, welcome to Film Fanatics, three film geeks discussing movies new and old. My name is Dan.
My name is Justin.
And I'm Joe.
This week, Denzel Washington is a man on a mission in The Equalizer. Leica Films follows up their first two well-received movies with Boxtrolls, so we'll see how it stands next to those. And we'll also review travel comedy Land Ho and Elizabeth Banks in Walk of Shame. In honor of his new movie, our top five this week is our favorite Denzel films. And we close the show with our three older movies, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, the beginning of Horror Month for Old Classic with Justin's pick Martin, and Oscar-nominated film The Angry Silence. First up, though, we haven't done a news item in a while. There's always some movie, being touted, a sequel or what have you. But this week we have a couple really good ones I think we should talk about. One is Clerks 3, which is finally happening. Of course, the rumor was that it was anyway, but Kevin Smith apparently has made enough money so far on his new movie Tusk that Clerks 3 is finally going to come out. And Bill and Ted's 3 is finally getting off the ground as well, with both Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves on board.
Basically the guy who succeeded and the guy who really needs that job.
Pretty much, I mean.
They got them both back, so that's got to stand for something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the fact that Keanu wants to do it, I guess.
Why not?
That 47 Ronin money, I guess, isn't really pouring in.
Well, sometimes you got to lean back with the classics,
That is true. Now, Alex Winter, in an interview, said they're just reworking the original draft, and it's going to be a long time till we actually see a movie, but they do have producers and people to finance it already in place, so...
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think it should be good. I do wonder, though, what is Bill and Ted's without Rufus? Obviously George Carlin no longer with us.
Well, I'm sure they'll at least have some kind of cameo, homage sort of thing.
Hopefully.
They'll bring something up. They'll at least mention him. I mean, you can't go without it.
Yeah, you'd have to mention him. I hope they don't recast it, though.
I don't think they will. It's kind of that big,
That iconic.
Yeah. I mean, I would say so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you touch it. People would be like, unless they could find somebody that did a really good job of making an impression. But that's pretty rare.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Justin has not seen those two films. We got to get him on that. Mm-hmm. But obviously Clerks and Clerks 2, near and dear to all of our hearts.
Absolutely.
Is that exciting news?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's one thing I've honestly been hoping Kevin Smith would do if he ever does actually retire, is at least close the book on the View Askew universe. I think that's really where his best stuff came from, and hopefully Clerks 3 is a worthy addition.
Yeah. I think these are both very, very good things to make sequels of. We hear a lot of news about less than exciting sequels. Now You See Me Too, for example. I know Justin is not happy about. But
making a sequel to that?
Yeah,
yep.
They sure are.
Well, it did well, so...
Soon to be released. And Hotel Transylvania, of course.
Speaking of why...
That'll be out next year.
Didn't that story wrap up pretty well?
It actually kind of did. It wrapped up perfectly.
So I have no idea where they're going to go with it.
Well, that's really odd. Okay.
But, so anyway, some good news in sequels. Let's move into our new release slate for the week, and we start with The Equalizer, which is now the fourth highest-grossing September weekend take. Actually, Hotel Transylvania is, I believe, number 1 or 2.
Oh, wow.
Speaking of which. Joe, let's hear about The Equalizer.
The Equalizer is a 2014 American thriller film, I guess, / action maybe, directed by Antoine Fuqua and written by Richard Wenk. Based on the television series of the same name, the film stars Denzel Washington, Martin Scorsese, forgive me, Chloe
That was
Grace,
pretty good.
Well, he's Russian. Robert McCall, played by Washington, is a retired Black Ops government operative who lives in Boston, and works at a hardware store called Home Mart. Get it? Home Mart?
It's like Home Depot and Walmart.
Wow, it actually sounds like a pretty awesome store, right?
Mm-hmm.
McCall has promised to his recently deceased wife that he'll leave his old life behind, but is compelled to act when Terry, played by Chloe, a young prostitute he has befriended, is hospitalized after being brutally beaten by her pimp, Slavy. McCall kills Slavy, unaware that he's a member of the Russian mob, and its leader, Vladimir Pushkin, sends his enforcer, named Teddy, played by Martin Scorsese, to Boston to eliminate McCall. This movie is awesome. I have to say that it kind of starts off really slow, and it actually works with some fairly subtle dramatic elements. Washington gives a good performance, and I think the thing that really holds this movie together, it kind of leans back on some of these old action ideals of the 80s and 90s, where you just have like a really charismatic main character that is incredibly badass, and you stick with that. For that alone, it basically holds the story together, even though it does fall into a lot of old cliches, silly tropes. Really, the story is not magnificent, but the characters are likable. There are some interesting ideas here. There's a lot of cool stylistic elements, particularly some of Fuqua's standard editing tricks, some cool fades here and there. I also like the way that they actually kind of worked around Denzel's age by having him be a smarter character, having to use his environment to defeat the bad guys as opposed to getting some obviously ridiculous action scenes. That's not to say, though, that the movie itself is not ridiculous, as that leads into one of the biggest problems with the movie is that this character is so awesome that it eliminates virtually all tension because he is basically unstoppable. This guy, by the end of the movie, they get to a final climax you realize is awesome. But you realize the writers kind of realized that they had oversold the tension, so they thought, okay, we have to go beyond this. But not a little beyond. They go way beyond. And basically...
Like insanely beyond.
Insanely beyond. And overall, though, Denzel here is enjoyable. He's not doing anything really ridiculous. He's kind of falling into his man-on-fire status. But all in all, though, it was enjoyable. I liked it. I liked the final action scene. I liked the performances. A little over the top, but it's kind of leaning on those old ideas. It's not trying to be anything overly smart or different. It just is basically making a stylized action movie. And I give it a B+.
Nice. Justin, what do you think of The Equalizer?
It seems for a number of directors, there are some actors who serve as their general go-tos. Tim Burton has Johnny Depp. Quentin Tarantino has Samuel L. Jackson. Director Antoine Fuqua has Denzel Washington. Washington starred in Fuqua's only real film with any sort of substance, Training Day, and the rest of his portfolio is essentially dark and gritty escapist entertainment masquerading as something more. His latest, The Equalizer, is no exception. While Washington, and Moretz for the ridiculously short amount of time she's in the film, certainly elevate things, but eventually it gets rather repetitive. Washington walks into a building, kills roughly 10 different guys in an insanely brutal fashion, and then it's on to the next one. Missed one? Fear not. For Fuqua's ethnically stereotypical villain has a never-ending supply of henchmen to be disposed of to run out the duration of the 2-hour and 13-minute runtime. Honestly, the first time's entertaining. It's the other 14 variations of the same action sequence that bother me, leading to a wildly over-the-top final battle with a tacked-on epilogue. It's truly a pity, because throughout the film there's definitely the promise of the next great TV to film adaptation, but this isn't it, and I give it a C.
Well, before I go, I will say that probably Spike Lee has designs on Denzel more than any other director. But as for the film itself, I'm smack dab in between you guys. We were all going through Denzel's filmography this week for our top 5, and one thing that stood out to me was he's never actually done a sequel to one of his films. And as I watched The Equalizer, I thought, well, this might make for a good film series. You know, it is based on the show. And a sequel was even announced for this movie months ago, which is kind of odd since nobody had seen it yet, but I guess Sony felt like they really had something. I'm not sure what they can do with a sequel that doesn't seem redundant, seeing as how, as Justin certainly mentioned, a lot of this movie is already repetitive. Also, half the fun is not knowing who this guy is, which we find out about halfway in, so that would be spoiled for the sequel. For this movie, though, there's some logic issues. For example, as Joe mentioned so astutely, it takes a lot of the tension away when the bad guys probably have 10 opportunities to kill Denzel very easily and never do. So there's no real element of danger for him. And though the big standoff at the end is mostly worth the wait, it's so dark that it's easy to lose where the action is. But overall, I do have to say The Equalizer is better than most of the recent action fare we've been talking about on the show. For me, it's a B-, so smack dab in between you guys.
There was a lot of really cool stuff with this that I think really would have made for good entertainment. It's just, it's way too long, it's very repetitive, logic gets pretty much thrown out the window, which you could argue as per usual for action movies these days, but at the same time, I don't think that should be an excuse.
Why should that not be an excuse?
Because I feel like that's just bad writing. I mean, yes, have we come to accept that as escapism? There's a reason Die Hard has 5 movies and probably going to have a 6th. But at the same time, you still want to have a decently crafted action film.
And what's wrong with good old-fashioned escapism?
Escapism will only take you so far. And with this one, because it's so long, trying to take itself so seriously, it basically detracts from it all.
I didn't really feel the length of this one. I do think it's repetitive. The scene that we saw in the trailer where there's a stick-up at the store that didn't need to be there at all.
No.
Especially because right afterwards he grabs a ball-peen hammer and then just walks away. If he's going to grab the hammer, I would like to see him take the guy out. That's kind of his character. So, you could have taken that out, saved a few minutes there, but I don't know. It was repetitive, but I didn't really feel the length of this one as much as certain others. And I thought Washington's performance was great.
Okay. I mean, it fit the role, but I don't think it was anything really stand out either.
I think it's better than Liam Neeson's accent.
Yeah, Liam Neeson's accent really did stick in my craw with the Tombstones.
That didn't bother me as much as it did for you two gentlemen.
Yeah, it definitely bothered me. I do wish Chloe Grace Moretz was in it more, but I don't know. At the same time, how many movies do we have to see this year where she's in the hospital the whole time? We already did that bit.
With the sad yet unfortunately true.
So they actually did some of the filming.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like she already did that part.
That's horrible, but I could totally believe it.
That's probably what it was.
I mean, she sort of served her purpose as the impetus for his character to go do his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that she needed to be in it more than that. You wanted to see more with her?
I think a little more would have definitely helped. I mean, I understand that she's only really there to set the stage, but I still think some of the most interesting scenes in the movie actually take place between her and Washington. So
I don't necessarily deny that, but those are all pretty much exposition scenes. They're not really... I mean, they advance the story, but there's no action, and, this is mainly an action thriller movie. Joe, would you agree with that?
I thought the dramatic components were to set things up, but I would agree. I would have liked to see more of her, but I thought she served her purpose well for the story. I don't think this movie was average, Justin. I mean, a C? Come on.
Yeah, I definitely think compared to especially some of the recent action movies we've seen, this was better.
The Tombstones, I guess, had
I don't consider Walk Among the Tombstones an action film. It's much more detective story-based. It's very much more focusing on the initial mystery of the story.
I see what you're saying. I mean, but I think the general big picture is that these are both sort of thriller-type films.
I mean, I'll give you that. Walk Among the Tombstones is at minimum a thriller, but I don't think it deserves to be lopped in the same category as The Equalizer.
I don't either, because The Equalizer is a better movie. But in terms of genre, I don't think they're massively that far different. Off. Maybe cousins. Maybe they're not siblings, they're cousins, but they're close. All right, well, let's move on now to the Boxtrolls, and that's going to be with Justin.
All his life, Eggs, played by Isaac Hempstead Wright, has lived underground with the Boxtrolls, finding and creating wacky inventions while evading Archibald Snatcher, played by Ben Kingsley, a man desperate to capture them all so he can become part of the upper class. Though when Egg's adopted father is captured, he travels up to the surface and seeks help from Winnie, played by Elle Fanning, to save his friends and change the public opinion about the little creatures. I admire Laika for their massively intricate details and wonderfully whimsical stories, but the Boxtrolls may be the first sign of trouble from their studio. Granted, the stop-motion animation's easily some of the smoothest I've ever seen in the subgenre, and the Boxtrolls themselves are a joy to watch, but the film is so completely and utterly scattered that I'm still not entirely certain what story it's trying to tell, days after seeing it. On one hand, it's a story about family and upbringing, tied with themes of judgment, though the other acts as a social satire on materialism, bound to shoot over children's heads completely. Both have plenty of promise, but get handled in the strangest, and arguably mean-spirited, way possible. That said, the film never drags, and there are a few decent twists in there for the kids, and I give it a B-.
Joe, how did you feel about the Boxtrolls?
Well, I'm pretty much actually, I guess I'll agree with Justin for the most part. I think that the best thing about this movie, which is kind of the main selling point for it, was just the amount of detail that goes into the sets and the designs, the stop motion. I mean, there's just no denying how amazing it is. I mean, just from a technical perspective, really the amount of time they put into this to create this world is awesome. So from an artistic point of view, that's actually really good. The voice acting was good, and it did have some good characters. I did actually like the Boxtrolls themselves, as well as some of the evil henchmen. They're pretty good too. Some of the quasi-philosophical discussions Nick Frost has are pretty good. Overall, though, I don't think this movie was bad, but I think that the problem is comparing it to their previous two films, which are very good and excellent. I really think that this one just kind of tells a fairly by-the-numbers story. It's actually along the same lines of Pixar. You know that they have such an amazing amount of capability. I mean, you've got your Toy Stories, and you've got your Finding Nemo, and then you've got Cars. It's just like, it's not necessarily that it's terrible, but they can do so much better. And that's basically how I felt about Boxtrolls. It's a decent story, it works, but it's not really doing anything that amazing. It's fairly basic. Really, the only thing about it that made it interesting were the stylistic components of the world and the fact that the characters were likable, if not the most interesting. I mean, I liked some of the aspects of the plot, but nothing was really delved into too much, really. You just got the bare bones, basically, enough to get you hooked regarding the villain, enough about Egg's father, but even the female lead, she was interesting, but she could have been more established. I feel like we didn't get as far into these characters as we could have gone. Overall, though, I actually give it a little higher than Justin. I give it a B. I thought it was an enjoyable film. It was pretty solid, but I would expect more than a solid effort from Laika.
Yeah, you're definitely going to hear some echoing from me. I mean, the look of the film is by far the big strength. I think it's a huge step forward for the stop-motion genre. The characters move fluidly and look outstanding. I heard an interview with one of the, I don't know who, I guess it was one of the actors or something, but they said it takes, each animator can do 3 to 4 seconds of the movie in a week. So they have this entire team of people making this movie, and it shows because it looks amazing. But as a film, it's just simply not as strong as its two predecessors. The message of acceptance, not judging based on rumor, family, it's all great, but in one form or another, both of the other two films already covered that. So the topics seem a bit of a retread. It's also a little bit lighter on laughs, and certain things just don't really jibe with what makes sense. I don't understand how Eggs, if he was raised by the Boxtrolls, speaks English. The Boxtrolls don't speak.
Actually, I've heard some people make that...
that really bothered me.
That observation. I think it might have been just him observing over a period of time. Maybe listening, because he basically was underground stealing all the time. He was around humanity for years, so...
I guess that's true.
Plus, I mean, obviously they had human literature and music. So
right.
You learned something.
But he thought he was a Boxtroll.
He did. However, they do sort of... They know a couple of English phrases.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the Minions.
Eggs,
yeah.
Yes, the Minions can say banana.
Yeah.
But they don't really talk. They have their own language.
That's fair.
So the fact that he wasn't speaking their language and speaking English,
To be fair, we do learn that he's a very intelligent person.
Well, yes, that is true.
He's gifted.
He lived with humans till he was probably about 2 or 3, I guess, judging by the flashbacks.
So it's possible,
But anyway, I'm with you, Joe. It's by no means a bad film, and I think people will enjoy it, but it is definitely a step down for Laika, and I give it a B as well. I do like that they find a lot of interesting voice people. Like Pixar and now Disney as well, and certainly DreamWorks usually go for the big A-lister. Brad Pitt's in this, and this person. Ben Kingsley and Nick Frost aren't the people that are, you think about that kids would know or cling to, but I think it's cool that they get these kind of people.
To be fair, I think it might just be more along the lines of good voice casting rather than just a big name.
I think that is exactly what it is. They're looking for somebody that fits the part rather than who's a marquee name.
But I think it's also, I like to believe, actor and actress searching out new venues to expand their horizons in terms of acting. I mean, I can't imagine Ben Kingsley was rushing towards doing voice work. But, I mean, he does a really solid job with this one.
Yes, he does, actually. I think he sounded a lot like Snape.
Yeah, definitely.
Alan Rickman.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, that's what I thought it was until I remembered, oh, no way, right? Ben Kingsley's in this.
I actually thought that his voice performance was fantastic. Like, had I not known that Ben Kingsley was portraying the villain, I don't think it would have picked up on the voice.
Yeah.
Like, it was very well hidden.
And they get new actors typically to play the children in these movies. Like Elle Fanning, okay, but, the kid that plays Eggs, the kid that played Paranorman. I like that they're trying to nurture new talent, and I love that it's hand-drawn, stop-motion, old-school style. I just wish this was a better film for it.
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, the technological advances speak for themselves. It's only half the battle, though.
Yeah, you need a compelling story as well. All right, well, up next is Land Ho, and Joe's going to talk about it.
Land Ho is an American/Icelandic adventure comedy film co-written and co-directed by Martha Stevens and Aaron Katz. and a pair of ex-brother-in-laws set off to Iceland in an attempt to reclaim their youth by going to Reykjavik nightclubs with young ladies, going to some trendy spas, and many, many, many rugged campgrounds. Really, literally, like about 50% of this movie is just out in the wild. But Paul Einhorn as Colin, he's the Aussie gentleman, and we have Erlen Nelson as Mitch, the Texan with little tact. I feel like the initial pitch for this one, for most people to go see it, it wouldn't work. You'd think, okay, this is a movie about two retirees going off and just kind of bonding and exploring themselves. Just not working. It sounds dull, it sounds boring, but really just through fantastic dialogue and some really good acting, these guys have some great chemistry. And admittedly, stylistically, there isn't too much new to this film. It really does have a pretty good story, and it is really this basic foundation of just good characterization. It's simple, but it works. And it's just, these guys have great chemistry. There's a lot of good laughs. There's a lot of good pop culture references that don't feel like they're kind of bobbing you over the head because they're not mostly that obvious. I mean, it's more possibly for a more seasoned audience. Still, though, I think that there are some compelling ideas that everyone can appreciate. Just the story about getting older and kind of struggling with the next part of your life, as well as the past. The set's designed for amazing scenery. Can't deny it might be a postcard for Iceland, but it's a great one, and it's got a great story to boot, and I give it an A-.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like one of the joys of being a critic is discovering a little gem that most have never heard of and possibly never would, were it not for shows like this one. Land Ho is one of these films. One word I could use to describe it is delightful. It's not without its flaws. The writer-directors, Katz and Stevens, seem like they're throwing a little too much into the mix with the direction. There's a lot of shaky cam shots that aren't necessary and some purposeful out-of-focus shots that I don't know if it works. But also it moves a little too briskly sometimes, which left me wanting more with certain portions and certain characters. But Nelson and Ehorn are perfect together. Their dialogue is so realistic. You mentioned, Joe, a lot of the pop culture references. They talk about movies a lot and, just stuff that real people talk about. Nelson, as the sex-obsessed Mitch, is one of the most realistic characters I think we've seen this year. And Einhorn's reactions to him are usually as funny as Nelson's antics. The cinematography, Joe, you hit it right on the head. I mean, it's like a postcard for Iceland. It goes without saying that it's gorgeous. Land Ho is one to seek out, and for me, it's a B+. Justin?
Every critic has some degree of bias, and for me, that's unquestionably character studies. Although I'm sure my co-hosts are arming before jokes for whatever I say next, I have to admit when there are two interesting characters on display for a film, that's often all it needs. While it takes a bit to get used to the obsessive antics of Mitch and pop culture savvy Cullen, their antics give way to a variety of witty and entertaining moments later. Unfortunately, this does get a bit episodic, particularly with the use of text to highlight where they are, complete with long-winded music cues. But the actors only get more likable as the film goes on, and the scenery, for better or for worse, is gorgeous, and I give it a B-.
Now, Justin, I just want to take the time. I'd like you to go just a teeny bit more detail. Just judging by your review, B- does seem a little low. What was it that was...
It seemed like you enjoyed the film.
It seemed like you really liked it. What was the big detractor for you?
Well, like I said, I did not like the episodic format. It's not bad. I don't regret it. But I also feel like we'll have these moments where they'll highlight where they are next, and we'll get this 5-minute cue of listening to In a Big Country being one of them. And it's nothing more than watching them dance around. It's a pointless scene.
You thought the scenes where they danced around were pointless?
Basically, they don't move the story forward.
They do, though, I feel. Because I feel like in those types of scenes, and there's really only maybe 2 of those montages in the movie, but it serves to solidify their friendship, their reason for the trip. Because there's a few scenes where certainly Colin is questioning what he's doing there and why, wishing he hadn't been dragged along and this and that. And those scenes are I thought, pure joy for those guys. And I don't mean the actors, I mean the characters. Realizing, oh my gosh, we're in a beautiful place. I mean, I'm sorry it didn't do it for you, but I do think that it helped their characters a little bit.
It helps, but I'm not entirely sure if I would say it's essential. I don't regret those scenes. They were fun to watch, but I don't think they were exactly pivotal to the storyline. Alongside that, I agree with you 100% that some of the shots were kind of meant to be sort of indie and experimental.
Yeah.
I hated, and I do mean hated, the out of focus shot for like 30 seconds where they're walking.
To be honest, I would say the experimental shots is probably what bumped it down from an A- for me. Because I did think they were trying a little too hard to be cool. This movie doesn't need to be cool.
It really doesn't.
You know?
I mean, these characters are interesting enough.
Mm-hmm.
The storyline's compelling. The twist as to why they're there, I personally thought was obvious. I mean, they kind of hinted at.
Yeah, but I don't even know if it matters.
It doesn't. But they're also sort of playing it as like, oh yeah, this is really why you're here. And it was kind of obvious after we heard
I think
something very important from another character.
Supposed to be obvious, though. You know, I mean, like, they reveal it pretty soon. I mean, you can pick up on it, basically. I don't think it's that hard to read.
I don't think that was supposed to be a reveal for the audience.
For the character.
It was a reveal for Colin.
Yeah, it's for Colin.
But even then, I think it shouldn't have been that big of a shock.
I don't think it really was, because if you see the character's
Yeah, he
reaction,
didn't
he's kind of like, well, I kind of half figured that anyway, but I didn't want to say anything, you know. I think it was more of an acceptance thing. You know, getting past, moving on. It's kind of what the movie's essentially about. And that was,
Yeah.
I don't think it was meant to be like a plot twist for anyone,
You know,
really.
This is probably a really weird example, but take it from somebody who's come out of the closet, Justin. Sometimes you just need to say something. I don't think it was necessarily for Colin to be like, oh my gosh. Sometimes people just need to get something off their chest, and that's what that scene was about to me. I don't think it was supposed to be a big shock for the audience or necessarily for Colin.
Had we not had that scene, Mitch's character would not have really gone under any real growth.
That is true.
So it was kind of pivotal for that.
No. Don't get me wrong. That scene is important. I understand why it's there. I have zero objection with that scene being there. All I'm saying is I'm not entirely sure if it's as big of a reveal as they wanted it to be.
Okay.
All right.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's supposed to be a big reveal.
I don't think it was
Personally,
either.
but
I mean, you make a very good point, Dan. I'll grant you that. I just am not entirely sure if it was doing everything they wanted it to.
Okay.
This is a very fun film. I enjoyed it. I don't regret it. I'd happily recommend it to people. But I also think it did have its fair share of problems.
I actually really did like the music cues, I have to say. I see your point about the dancing around montages, but the parts where it was shifting from city to city, which I did like the CG of the name of the city or whatever they were. I thought that was cool, but you know.
Could have been worse.
Yeah, it could have been worse. But I really liked the music selections they chose, because until In a Big Country, which we don't hear until really the end of the, more than halfway, like probably the last 20, 25 minutes.
Right.
Everything they picked, and I made mental note of this, was an instrumental song.
Yeah.
Some of them were actual songs and they did an instrumental version, and some were just probably instrumental songs. I thought that was a nice touch.
I'm fine with the fact that they chose to put in music. It's fitting. It works. It's just, I think they went on too long, like I was saying.
Okay.
Like,
just the montages was your main issue with the music.
Yes.
Okay. Because, yeah, I thought the music fit the tone pretty well. But I do agree. I don't know if I would call it episodic in nature like you, but I agree that there were times I wanted them to spend more time with certain characters or in certain places. But, as anybody that's traveled knows, sometimes you don't get that. You're in a place for a day or two, and then you move on to the next city. So, you know, as much as I did want to see more from some of these characters, I can appreciate why they didn't do that.
No, I mean, I get that, but I feel like there's a smoother way to do that than just simply, well, now we're done in Reykjavik, now on to the next place.
Yeah, I didn't understand quite what happened with his niece and her friend. They sort of...
They're there and then they're gone.
Well, I thought maybe I missed it or something, that they said, like, okay, you know, we're leaving tomorrow to go to somewhere. Maybe I missed it and they did say that,
well, I think they did make a mention at one point, like, in the letter that they sent to him, like, we'll see... We're going to come down and see you guys for a couple days.
Oh, okay. Well...
They were traveling already, so...
Yeah,
they were both kind of traveling together. They just happened to meet up, I guess, at that one night or whatever.
I liked that part, but I thought it was good. It was actually one of those scenes where I do agree. It felt like there was something important happening there, and it kind of briefly bleeds into the next part of the story, but then it's kind of forgotten. So,
yeah.
So that's a good example. But then again, it's kind of a coming and going.
Yeah, that's true. Well, definitely one to check out if you've not heard of Land Ho. Up next, we're going to do our home media moment, and that is Walk of Shame. In this, Elizabeth Banks plays Megan Miles, a reporter who just narrowly misses her chance to be a big-time national news anchor when the station she works for chooses another woman over her for the slot. So Megan grabs her friends and goes out for a night on the town. Halfway through that night, very drunk and having slept with a man she just met, played by James Marsden, she gets a call from her agent saying the network decided to go with her after all, as long as she can get to the station in time for the morning news. Unfortunately, making that trip proves difficult as her car gets towed and her night goes downhill from there. Banks really tries her hardest to keep the movie afloat here and is pretty game for anything, but after some good laughs in the first half hour, the movie becomes little more than a one-note joke. And that joke is that around every corner, people keep mistaking Megan for a prostitute. Not exactly a high concept, and this film doesn't even have a clever take on it. There is a particularly funny scene early on in a crack house, and like I said, Banks is really trying, but other than that, this one falls flat, and I give it a D+. Joe?
Well, I have to say, I don't really like Elizabeth Banks that much.
Oh, okay.
Normally. I mean, I think she's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not sure if it's that she's a bad actress. I just typically find that she plays characters that I find annoying.
Okay.
So maybe that's what it is.
Could be.
Really, you know, she's usually is not a character you like, so maybe you have that imbued. But even in
the Hunger Games.
She's just not one of my favorite actresses. I think she's okay in this. Honestly, I kind of thought that the initial idea was okay. I thought it was interesting, but it's boring. I found this movie pretty boring. Really, it was just very repetitive. I didn't think the humor was that great. I did think that the crack house scene...
That was the best scene
was
of
pretty
the movie.
funny. I actually did like that part. Overall, though, I didn't feel like there was any tension. I just didn't really care that much about the character or her dilemma. For me, I actually would give it a D.
Okay.
Like I didn't really have that much interest in it, with the exception of a couple laughs and really like a decent premise at the beginning. I didn't really like it.
Okay, fair enough. Justin?
It honestly saddens me that moviegoers live in a world in which a studio is willing to accept Walk of Shame as a potential investment, but not the tons of other ideas out there that we'll be lucky if they ever get made. Yes, it stars a fairly recognizable celebrity like Elizabeth Banks, but just about everything with this film is done so poorly, I confess I'm somewhat in awe of its existence. In no particular order, it's sexist, racist, dumb as a brick, and not anywhere near as much fun as it seems to think it so much is. The only time the film even tries to have anything meaningful to say is in one brief line by Banks near the end, which even then gets bogged down by even more disgusting and hateful humor. Perhaps the nicest thing I can say about this film, as a critic, is that it's short, so even when the film is truly at its worst, and there are many instances of this, the ending isn't too terribly far off. Walk of Shame may not be the worst thing I've seen this year, but had I seen it in time, it definitely would have made runner-up for the summer's bottom 3, and I give it an F.
After I saw this, I was like, man, if Justin thinks, To
be fair, though...
Because you're always below me a little bit in comedy, and I didn't even like this movie, so I figured.
To be fair, though, the one bit where she is sort of talking about, like, why in society are we so prone to do that, to judge like this. I was thinking that could have actually made it somewhat worth it. I probably would have given it a D- if it hadn't continued to go into more disgusting and obnoxious territory.
Wouldn't you say, though, that, and maybe this means more to me than it does to somebody else, but that Elizabeth Banks really, really is giving it her all here. It's not like she's walking through this, no pun intended, or sleepwalking through this.
Even more so.
But you know what I mean? I don't know. To me, when I see that an actor's really, really trying, even with lousy material, I find it hard to completely hate the movie. I mean, I did laugh a few times, so there was that. But, I don't know, like, when you compare this to, I don't know, Tammy, I guess, is a good example, because we've talked at length about how Melissa McCarthy seems to be doing the same thing, playing the same character. I think Elizabeth Banks really is, going for the gusto here. Would you agree with that? Disagree with it?
I'll give you that.
Doesn't matter?
I'll give you that she's trying, but it's kind of captain goes down with the ship scenario.
Okay.
It's like, yes, I applaud her for trying. I do. But she's still...
in this movie.
Yeah. I'll grant you that she gets around with her roles, but she's just not one of those actors or actresses that's able to really elevate a movie significantly.
Okay. So you don't really like her all that much either, just in general.
I mean, she's okay. She's not anybody I think is particularly memorable.
Okay. I kind of like her. I guess I'm alone
well,
in that
to
in
be
this
fair,
room.
I actually do like her in the Hunger Games.
She is really good in the Hunger Games. Yeah. She is supposed to be annoying, of course.
She is, but I do like the way her character grows, and she does a good job portraying those subtle shifts.
Yes.
I did like that.
Well, and Justin, you and I have talked at various different times about Pitch Perfect. I think other than Rebel Wilson, she's the only really good part about Pitch Perfect.
I would agree.
Right? I think she's hysterical, and I wouldn't put it past her if most of those lines were improv.
It definitely seemed like it.
Knowing the two of them together. I forget the actor's name that she was with, but he appears in everything.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess maybe I like her more. But no, this was not a good movie. I don't recommend it to anyone. Even Elizabeth Banks fans
not worth
can
it.
Stay away from it. All right, well, let's move on to our top 5 Denzel Washington movies. The best of the best. The man has done some incredible movies. And, Joe, we're going to start with you for the Denzel top 5.
Movies, not necessarily performances.
Correct.
Well, what would a top 5 be without a few honorable mentions? So,
don't write a litany here.
No, but I actually want to mention 2 here. First one is Man on Fire. I mean, it's just a really awesome, kick-ass movie. Really, it is. It's got some of the most brutal violence you'll ever see, but Denzel kills it in this one, and he kills a lot of people.
I was going to say.
Truth be told, Man on Fire is basically the movie I wish The Equalizer was.
It's honestly, Man on Fire is a better version of The Equalizer. I can agree with you there. But
I think Denzel does deserve a few honorable mentions. Can I just say that?
Well, I have another one.
Yes, I would never criticize you for having several honorable mentions for Denzel.
Because, making this list, I was like, there are just a couple movies I got to briefly mention. The other one I really liked, I wanted to put on my top 5, but I have issues with it, is Fallen. I mean, this is a really interesting movie, classic John Goodman, as well. Really, really cool concept. I do like some of the ways the story moves, and Denzel's very good in it as well. Like I said, I have some issues with it, but just stylistically, it has some really original ideas. And I'm going to kick it off here at my number 5. I think Dan will appreciate. Admittedly, would probably be higher on the list, but I only saw it once a long time ago. And that is Philadelphia.
Ooh.
I mean, Philadelphia is just an excellent film. A lot of great drama. Really, probably one of Tom Hanks' best performances, too. Really. And just fantastic. Just a lot of great societal commentary. Really kind of unpleasant to watch because it is such a struggle. But it's really one of those movies that it's just, you have to see. You have to see it. Number 4 is Crimson Tide. Honestly, this is one of the best war thriller movies I've ever seen. This has got some great play between Washington and Hackman. Also some early Gandolfini as well.
Oh,
very
that's
early.
Right.
They're really a lot of great performances. It's a little out there, but considering the Cold War had ended only a couple years previous, I think it worked really well for the time. Just some really good editing, some really good tension. Great one there. Number 3 is one of my personal favorites. It's The Siege. Criminally underrated movie. When I saw this one, I'm like, this is one of the best action movies ever made. Really, it's just a really great movie about counterterrorism and really prolific because it predicted basically the entire mentality of the country just a couple of years later after 9/11. It's eerie. Literally, I won't spoil it for you. And also, one of the rare times you actually see Bruce Willis as a villain, and he is a really good villain in this one.
So that was out before 9/11 then?
90s? 98, 99.
Oh, no kidding.
And literally, you're thinking, wow, 9/11, it seems like it would have happened after 9/11, but obviously more ridiculous and amped up, but it's still pretty good. Number 2 is The Hurricane. It's easily one of Denzel's best. Really just a fantastic movie. Probably one of the best dramas I've seen in recent years. Just really excellent. I've always loved this one. And, I mean, great song by Bob Dylan, too.
It is.
Probably one of his best
I
songs.
definitely need to see that movie.
Oh, and I did forget it here, but one more honorable mention. You guys are probably surprised Malcolm X wasn't on this list. And I will spoil it, it's not my number 1, but it is a really good movie. And you should check that one out as well if you have not seen it.
Very good. I have not.
I will say, though, it is a bit long.
I think that's probably why I shied away from it. Isn't it 3 hours?
It's really long.
Yeah.
I think it's at least 3 hours.
Okay. Yeah, no surprise. All right, well, I have one honorable mention on the Denzel list, and that is Two Guns. We very rarely see Denzel in a comedic performance, and I really like the chemistry between him and Wahlberg. Now, admittedly, I have not seen nearly as many Denzel movies as you guys, so maybe Two Guns seems like an odd choice, but I greatly enjoyed that film. My number 5 is The Great Debaters. This is a great movie if you guys have not seen it. Forrest Whitaker gives a great performance. Denzel, of course. He plays, the teacher. It's set in the communist era, and they feel like he is a communist, so they try to take his debate club away, and all based on a true story. And the lead kid in it is Nate Parker, who is in all these really great unseen movies. He's the kid in Arbitrage that Joe and I like. And he's been in some other movies like that. My number 4 is The Taking of Pelham 123. I really enjoyed both versions of this movie if you've never seen the 70s version. But he just is the classic, cool, collected Denzel in this movie. Sort of like in The Equalizer, where it's like he always knows exactly what's going on, what he's going to say, what he needs to tell this person. And a surprisingly good evil performance from Travolta.
Pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, which I did not expect. Because usually you don't think of him as being able to pull that off.
It was during the rock and the ball beard days.
Yep.
That weird face.
Yeah, it was a weird face.
That was weird.
It verges a little bit on the comedic with his performance, but...
No, not as comedic as Paris with Love.
Well, yes, that I refuse to watch. My number 3 is Training Day. I do think that it's a little bit over the top. I think it tries a little too hard to be street.
But King Kong doesn't have shice on him.
Oh, I know. He certainly doesn't. But no, just a great performance from both him and Ethan Hawke. Here's another one like Pelham 123, where it's like you didn't really expect Ethan Hawke to be able to pull that out at that point in his career, because we were used to seeing him as, Reality Bites and all these less intense roles, I guess. My number 2 is Crimson Tide. Came out my senior year in high school. It was the first movie I drove to because I had just gotten my license.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
And so we went to see Crimson Tide, me and my friend.
Good choice.
And it was a good choice. We were very happy with the movie. Really, it is a little bit over the top, like you mentioned, Joe. It's one I haven't seen in a long time. I will admit that. It's probably been over a decade since I've seen it. But it's always enjoyable to watch. Very intense. Justin?
To start mine off, my honorable mention is Training Day. As I mentioned in my Equalizer review, I honestly do think this is Fuqua's one movie with actual substance. I thought the early interplay with Hawke and Washington is great. The problem is, I think the longer the movie goes on, the less believable and the more over the top it gets.
Yep.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong.
I agree.
Which is why I couldn't honestly, in good conscience, put that on this list. But to get right to it, number 5, which I think is going to be the most objectionable from you two on this one, American Gangster. Yes, it's rearing its head again.
I thought it was going to be like number 2, to be honest.
I knew you really liked
I'm
that.
thrilled that it's number 5.
No. It's really sharp cinematography. I thought it had compelling storytelling, and because I've mentioned all this in several other episodes, that's all I'm going to say about that. Number 4 is Inside Man. This is the one I personally have some objections to. I do love this movie, but I have more than a couple issues with this character in this movie. I think he's supposed to be figuring out what's really going on in the general heist, but just about everyone else is doing the heavy lifting, including Jodie Foster.
That's right.
But fortunately, even though it's not the largest role in the film, the other performances more than make up for it, and I still will happily say it's one of the most original heist movies of the last decade.
Justin really likes The Inside Man.
Oh, I knew that. I thought these were going to be his top 2, to be completely honest.
I will be honest. I think they're lower, but
Yeah.
still, good stuff.
Number 3 is Remember the Titans. This is a bit of an interesting one because I saw this when I was a kid, and I really didn't like it. Sports movies, just in general, at the time really bored
Justin,
me.
hold the phone.
Hold on.
Before you continue.
Go on.
You didn't like Remember the Titans?
As a kid.
Everybody liked Remember the Titans. That was like...
He was bored.
I was going to finish that.
Okay.
But fast forward about 6-8 years, my sociology teacher in high school decides we're going to talk about Remember the Titans in terms of racial studies and things like that. And I just absolutely loved it. I thought it was a really good story about racial tensions from Disney, which I thought they would completely sugarcoat. And Washington just leads the charge 100%.
Well, I will say, Justin, you're all right. Remember the Titans is actually a really good movie.
And my number 2, Philadelphia. This seems to be usually regarded as a Hanks film, but it's just got such a great Denzel Washington performance. I love his progression from beginning as a kind of blatant homophobe, and then really having a wealth and admiration for Hanks' character by the end of it. And it's been said that Hanks believes that he learned more from working alongside Denzel than he has anyone else, and I totally believe it.
Yeah, I believe that. Joe, what's your number one?
What do you think it is?
I think it's John Q.
You know, I really
Because
like...
I know you like that movie a lot.
I really like John Q, but it's kind of a bad movie.
Okay.
Like,
All right.
I
Fair enough.
Like, I really like it. It's got a great performance from him, but it brings up so many moral questions. It's like, it's enjoyable, but it's bad, so I couldn't... You know what I mean? It's kind of...
It's definitely guilty pleasure.
Like, it's on the line of guilty pleasure. Like, it's not, like, terrible, but it's close.
Glory.
No.
Really? These are all good movies that you love.
They are all great movies that I
Okay.
love, but there were too many.
True.
If I just did honorable mentions, I'd be listing all the guys. Remember
That
the
is-
Titans?
that is
like,
true.
I'm serious, like really. But no, my number one is Antoine Fisher.
Oh, okay.
His directorial debut, I believe.
This movie is a fantastic drama. It's really good. Denzel has more of a supporting role in this, more than anything. But like just his interplay with the main character and the struggle he goes through, and just the flashback sequences, just it's a really moving and powerful story. And I guess for a Denzel Washington movie, for him to star in it and direct it and be so closely involved, this is just a magnificent movie. Highly recommended if you guys haven't
Yeah,
seen
it's
it.
one I'll have to check out.
It's like really, critics liked it, but people kind of forget about it.
Yeah.
Really, really great movie.
I remember when it came out, really wanting to see it. I just never got around to it.
Well, my number one is, of course, Philadelphia.
I knew that was coming.
I mean, how could it not be? First of all, Justin, I think people largely remember it as a Tom Hanks movie because it's the one that finally won Tom Hanks an Oscar after so many great performances leading up to it.
I know you guys keep saying that,
But
I've always thought of it as a Denzel movie.
is that right?
Yes.
Don't get me wrong. I personally, I think they should.
Yeah,
it's definitely shared
I
feelings,
remember
but-
it very much as a two-hander because they both are equally amazing for one thing, and their characters are equally important to the movie. But I think the general consensus probably is that it's more of a Tom Hanks movie.
It's interesting.
But that's probably from a lot of people that have never seen it either. That just know, oh yeah, he won the Oscar for that.
Good point.
You know? For me, until Titanic came out, Philadelphia was the movie that made me just bawl more than anything else. I had just come out a year before it came out, so it was like the AIDS crisis, Hanks is gay. It just really spoke to me, and I remember just leaving the theater in tears for literally 10 minutes. It was so powerful, so great. It didn't quite have the same impact the second time I watched it, but it is just a fantastic performance from both of those guys. And I have to say, Mary Steenburgen as well, as the other lawyer. A lot of people forget how good she is in that movie, too, because we see her in Back to the Future 3 and maybe a sitcom here or there. But she actually gave a really good performance as well.
And don't forget Las Vegas.
That's right, of course. You're
Lest we
right.
forget.
What an A-list performance there in Las Vegas.
It's pretty standard Steenburgen, actually.
Yes, it is. Which is what's so impressive about Philadelphia, is it's the one thing you could probably say is not usual Steenburgen.
Yeah, it's about
You
right.
know? But no, just a great movie. And Justin?
My number one is Glory. When it comes to historical dramas, there are a few better that can do it as well as Edward Zwick. I thought he had absolutely phenomenal casting choices that highlight the mindset of the soldiers as well as where everyone stands in regards to the war. I thought it really showed the bond of an entire unit in wartime and just how far some are willing to go for their fellow soldier, including refusing pay.
Want to know something interesting, Justin?
What's that?
Might surprise you. It's actually my favorite Matthew Broderick performance.
I believe it. I mean, Morgan Freeman's no slacker either, and
Well,
Denzel obviously won the award, but
Wow. Understatement of the year.
no.
Morgan Freeman's no slacker.
be
Listen,
fair,
he pulled off God perfectly. Okay? Calling him pretty good is a bit of an understatement.
To be fair, though, that's kind of funny because it's actually fairly early Freeman, too.
yes.
Yeah.
Even though he's
yes.
old as hell,
Right after Lean On Me.
it's right up there with Lean On Me and Driving Miss Daisy. This is like
Yeah.
the beginning for him. Great war movie. Great drama.
Absolutely.
Good stuff.
Very
You
well, very recommended.
Definitely
Yeah.
should see it, yeah.
All right, well, good list all around. And we're going to move into our triple feature now of older films, and that kicks off with The Perks of Being a Wallflower. Based on the popular book by Stephen Chbosky, who also wrote the screenplay and directs his work, Perks is a coming-of-age story set in the mid-90s in Pittsburgh. It revolves around Charlie, played by Logan Lerman, a shy freshman who spent some of his 8th grade year in a mental hospital. He soon meets a group of outcast seniors at his school and becomes part of the gang. We go through pretty much an entire year with Charlie, ending around the end of summer. Emma Watson and Ezra Miller play step-siblings Sam and Patrick. Charlie has an immense secret crush on Sam, and Patrick is a gay underachiever in a secret relationship with a popular football player. Mae Whitman and Paul Rudd co-star as Charlie's unwanted girlfriend and his favorite teacher, respectively. The Perks book was given to me as a present about 10 years ago, and though I had never even heard of it, I read it in 2 days flat, and it quickly became a favorite. So I was excited, but of course hesitant when I heard it would be a film. And then I saw the trailer. I knew the world was in for something special. Nothing from the novel has been compromised, and even Charlie's voiceover, based on writing letters to us, his pen pal friend, remains intact and isn't awkward. It is a testament to the power of one clear vision. Chbosky's screenplay and directing are completely consistent with the book, which in itself is a glorious recreation of youth. It hits perfectly the highs and lows of being in high school and how we deal with our friends, family, teachers, bullies, and being abused. I cannot recommend this movie enough. The actors are all great. Even Emma Watson, her American accent breaks here and there, but other than that, perfect. And for my money, it is easily one of the best coming-of-age movies since the John Hughes glory days of the 1980s, and I give it an A+. Justin, what do you think of The Perks?
Since I've capitalized on watching new releases as a critic, there have been many a fun adventure tracking down a few of the movies to watch for the show. Perks, however, for the time that Dan and I saw it, was a beast in and of itself. Obviously, this was before we did anything for the show. The two of us waited an eternity to find a theater relatively close by that was playing it, and by just the sheer stroke of luck I caught an advertisement for its release, we raced off to see it. While no repeat viewing will ever top the satisfaction from that evening, the wait was definitely worth it. Perks is not just one of the most honest and authentic takes on high school, it's a fantastic slice-of-life film, truly hitting home the importance of the people in our lives and the impact they leave when they're gone. At times it's hysterically funny, others heartbreaking, but there's never a doubt that director and author Chbosky took everything that was great about his novel and fearlessly put it on screen for all to see. Then again, with wonderful actors like Lerman, Watson, and scene stealer Miller, it grabs attention and never stops. The Perks of Being a Wallflower was on my top 5 for 2012, and even after screening number 3, I am more than content with that, and I also give it an A+.
What a great movie.
Truly.
Joe, you had not seen this before.
Nope.
You haven't read the book, right?
Nope.
Nope. All right, so let's hear your take on The Perks.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of hype because I've been hearing about how much Dan loves this movie.
Yes, it was my number one of 2012.
Yes, you really liked it.
Yep.
And I do have to say, I can't really, follow those reviews, guys. I mean, there's no way to top you guys. Summed it up pretty well. I mean, I don't think I've ever seen a movie that more accurately captured what it is to be a lonely, frustrated teenager, which I think everybody is to some extent at some point in their lives. Really, it's probably the best coming-of-age story I've ever seen, actually. Just some really good performances. I liked how the characters were all quirky and memorable, but it was in a very realistic way. Like, it wasn't to the point where it seemed overly cartoony.
Yeah, you knew these people in high school.
You knew these people, you had friends with them, you saw them, you'd been around some of these parties, these situations, you had some of these thoughts, you had some of these struggles. It's just really awesome how it was able to kind of flow so naturally. Just capture something so believable, and I really liked it. It felt very authentic. The performances were great. Really, I think the only real negatives were the fact that some characters you just wish you got to see more of, like Paul Rudd's teacher is probably one of the best characters in the whole movie, and you only get like maybe 3 scenes with him.
That's true.
It's just a shame. Like, it's utilized well, but you want more.
He does factor in a little bit heavier in the book, not a ton, but a little more. Yeah,
and admittedly, I felt like if they crammed too much, maybe the story would have dragged. So I thought it was probably a pretty good adaptation. I'm assuming, but there were little things like that kind of bugged me. Like, I wanted more, but when I want more from a movie, that's generally a good sign, as you know, guys. But the only real negative that did kind of bug me, and maybe this is a book translation, they were hinting at something that I thought was honestly kind of obvious. I know it's supposed to be like a big twist. Don't say it doesn't work well. The thing is, I feel like there's a really important part towards the end of the movie involving Joan Cusack's character. There seems to be a whole possibility for a way they can take the story and add a lot more meat to it.
Mm-hmm.
Show the struggle of this dark aspect. It seems really important. They acknowledge it. I guess it works. And then they just kind of gloss over it. Maybe because the movie is already long. I have to say that's a little bit of a negative.
Okay.
I wish they had spent a little more time with that. Can you attest to that?
Yeah, well, I think the reason for that is basically in the book. The book is told to the reader in the voiceovers that we see in the movie with Charlie, writing to us, his friend. The entire book is that way.
Okay.
It's basically like written in letters by Charlie to the reader.
Okay.
And I think that part is a little bit more glossed over because it's not something that the character, wants to go that much into and relive his experiences with the therapist and this and that. So the book actually doesn't really delve much deeper into that either.
All right.
I think for that reason.
Well, I'm glad you explained that to me because my those were my thoughts, and I thought that was weaker. But if that is actually the way they were trying to do it, to emulate that does make more sense.
You're not wrong. It would have been great to see more with her.
Like,
definitely.
Had it been, I guess, I don't want to say more traditional, but just a different type of movie. I think that you could have had like a whole extended third act with the therapy delving into that, because that's really the crux of the character's issue.
Right.
It really is. I thought that was I wish they had gone a little more into that. But there was already enough good drama in the film, so I can't say it took away from it too much. I had to ask you this first, because my original grade for it was an A, but that actually makes sense. Bump it up to an A+.
Wow.
It's a really good movie, but I had to get clarification on that.
I appreciate you asking.
But I will admit, I thought this movie was going to be like, okay. I didn't think it was going to be that great.
Well, when you hear from people that it was their favorite movie of the year and they watch 200 movies a year, that is a high bar
I know.
to cross.
And I have faith in you
so
guys.
Your expectations were probably pretty high.
My expectations were fairly high.
Yeah.
But the thing is, other than you guys, I've never heard anybody talk about this movie.
Yeah.
Which is kind of depressing.
Did nobody see it? I know it didn't get like a wide release.
It got a semi-wide release. Like, it went to about 800 theaters. The closest it came here was about 20 miles away, unfortunately, which is where we saw it. But yeah, like I said, when I got the book, I had never heard of it, but it was already like a huge best-selling book. It just depends on the circles that you run in, because like there's people that are like obsessed with this book and the movie, and then people that it's just not even a blip on their radar.
Like I've heard in passing, like maybe on websites that people like it occasionally, but like it's something I've never heard it come up in conversation. So it is a shame though. Like it's really a good movie. I'm really glad I saw it. It was
good,
really absorbing experience. I wanted more.
I can't say that you're wrong about that. I always want more of the perks. And I think it's interesting to note, I didn't actually find this out until this week, but John Hughes did option the book and was working on a screenplay for it when he passed away.
Of course.
Oh, my word.
Which I think would have been a different movie.
Absolutely.
I love John Hughes.
Yeah.
But it would not have been that same singular vision that Chbosky brought to it. And I feel like it may have been a little bit...
It would have detracted.
It would have detracted, right?
Because John Hughes can have some meat, obviously.
Yeah.
But there's always that kind of 80s stylistic element that kind of makes it seem a little more flashy, and it's a little more superfluous. Like his stuff always seems a little more stylish, even though there are good characters. You get distracted by that.
Well, and the other thing is, I feel like, and you mentioned this, Joe, that, these are all people in Perks that, we've seen in our own high schools and stuff. And with John Hughes, it's more of the stereotype that we get. The Breakfast Club, obviously, is the most major example of that.
Yes.
But, I mean, even in Ferris Bueller, there's stereotypes.
I mean, I think that's ultimately the point. But yeah, that's true. It feels more like it's this cardboard,
like this is more realistic,
idealized version of high school.
Yeah.
It's almost satirical.
It's not so cut and dry.
Right. And the other thing I think that is so great about this story is that it is universal. It speaks to me specifically so much because I was graduating high school when they graduated high school in the movie, whereas you guys went to high school 10 years later and everything's still the same.
Exactly.
Well, good. I'm glad you saw it. I'm glad you A+'d it.
It's really a good movie.
Good triple A+ there. All right, well, moving on. We've decided that October is going to be horror month for old classics, so we're each going to pick one of our favorite old classic horror movies, and you can join in on the fun as well, because we always do a listener's choice old classic each month, and if you have one in mind for a horror movie, you can let us know about that as a comment here on the YouTube channel or on our Facebook group, which is Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And first up is Justin, and that was the movie Martin.
Martin, played by John Amplas, is a vampire. Well, sort of. Sunlight only irritates his eyes enough to wear sunglasses, crucifixes don't bother him, and he's only able to draw blood by a razor blade. However, when he heads off to Pittsburgh, he meets his granduncle, Tate Kuda.
Is this the Pittsburgh cast?
I guess so.
That's right.
Then again, it's Romero.
Place in Pittsburgh.
I know, but you're right. I just thought, I thought for some reason,
was Walk of Shame in Pittsburgh? It might have been.
That's horrifying.
It might have been.
I think you're right.
I see a title for him.
And Land Ho, they went to Pittsburgh, too, after they went to Reykjavik. That was
Just
there.
really stopped back the final trip when they capped off their trip.
It had a layover in Pittsburgh.
Sorry, Justin.
No worries. When he heads off to Pittsburgh, he meets his granduncle, Tate Kuda, played by Lincoln Mazel, who vows to stake him through the heart if Martin kills anyone. Since we decided to run horror movies for October, I took it upon myself to find something a bit more under the radar for my choice. Martin's considered by director George A. Romero to be the best film he's ever made, and while I'm not entirely certain anything could top one of the greatest sequels of all time, Dawn of the Dead, I definitely understand where he's coming from. Martin essentially embodies everything that has made Romero the established horror icon he is today. Yes, it's a horror film, but it's also a social commentary on addiction, and to some extent even the media, as Martin ends up becoming a bit of a late-night radio celebrity. Admittedly, it's a bit more experimental than some of Romero's other films, which will probably make this one love it or hate it. But the fact that he managed to put a new spin on the tired vampire subgenre is rather impressive. Martin, for all its originality and a couple clever stylistic tricks, gets an A.
Joe, what'd you think of Martin?
I'll be completely honest with you. Like, thinking about this one, I had no idea what to even say about it, because I definitely see some Romero there. I really like the cinematography. I'll start with that. I mean, Romero's good with the camera. I mean, he knows how to utilize that 70s gritty feel. I think that there is some satire there. There's definitely some social commentary. I think it's kind of all over the place, though. The story is definitely an interesting take on the whole vampire myth. I did like that. I thought the character was interesting, but I felt like the story itself was a bit uneven. I'm not sure if it exactly knew what it was. I think there is a lot going on there, and perhaps not enough balance in terms of the thematic components. Overall, though, I thought it was interesting. I'm glad I saw it. I do not think it's Romero's best film.
That's okay.
Shot.
Neither do I.
But I think it's one of those examples of a director kind of struggling to find himself, but still getting some interesting elements in there. Overall, though, I'm going to settle with a B-. It probably deserves a rewatch, maybe some more ruminating, but I thought it was interesting. Definitely some things worthwhile here, but definitely disappointing compared to some of the classic zombie films that I love.
Well, Joe, you probably know I'm closer to you than I am on Justin with this movie. I mean, full disclosure, I'm a novice in the horror genre compared to you guys anyway. Most of what I've seen is of like the last 20 years variety, not so much the so-called classics in the genre. I had never even heard of this movie, though of course I knew, Romero's name as being legendary. But honestly, I'm not sure if I got this movie. I didn't think it was scary. I was even kind of bored with it. I will admit that for the time period and low budget, the effects were pretty cool. And the story did have some weight to it. I liked the bit with the grandfather. And I also acknowledge that this is probably one of the cornerstones of how vampires are perceived in the modern day, with, more up-to-date stuff like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and things like that. But I just was not feeling this one. It's a C+ for me. I don't know if I've seen any of Romero's other things. Did he do the original Dawn of the Dead?
And Night of the Living Dead.
Yeah.
Okay, Night of the Living Dead I've seen.
Coming to Get You, Barbara.
Yes. Is it in black and white?
Yep.
Okay, I've seen Night of the Living Dead probably a long time ago. I was probably in high school, but I have seen that.
That's my favorite.
So that's Romero. Okay.
Have you seen
See, that I liked very much. So, Justin, what is it about this movie that you think really made it pop and stand out? Because obviously you appreciated it a lot more than we did.
Yes, please. Actually, if you could enlighten me, I will admit I was bored for some of it too. Maybe I didn't grasp on everything.
For this one, I think, like I said, it really does embody a lot of what Romero does. He adds in a lot of social satire. I think what's interesting with this one is he very much plays both sides with Martin. There's always the overlying thing like, oh yes, by the way, he's a vampire. But you also at the same time don't see him do anything really all that vampiric. And you can easily make the argument it's all in his head.
I think he does some pretty vampirical things. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but I mean, he still does kill people.
He does kill people, but he doesn't bite their necks. He holds a crucifix. But I think it's just interesting that he found a way to really tell a unique vampire story after there's been way, way, way too many interpretations on Dracula. We have all sorts of spin-offs to Dracula, and need we bring up what I consider one of the most overrated films of the 80s. I'm going to say it. Crucify me, listeners. Fright Night is overrated.
But to be fair, I think you might be thinking about films kind of like after the fact. I mean, this was like, what, 76? I mean, this is still really...
Yeah.
I mean, this is before the vampire thing got overdone.
Other than some Dracula movies back in the day, I don't think vampires were quite all the rage in the 70s.
I mean, this is like
I'm not saying that they...
Lost Boys, pre-Anne Rice, way before Twilight. I mean, I see...
Well, thank goodness for that. But...
No, I mean, I see what you're saying, and I do agree that there is more of an appreciation for original ideas, but this is kind of before I think vampires were really overdone and hated now.
I mean, there was still a lot of Dracula movies. I mean, I'm not going to list them all for the sake of time, but...
You're right about that. But beyond Dracula, though...
Still when people thought vampires, that was like the first thing that they went to.
Well,
I thought it was really cool that Romero basically took that and put it on its head.
No, cool spin on the idea, I agree. I think the biggest problem for me was, in comparison to some of his other films, one of the best things about Romero, I think, is that I really like how he has really defined characters.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like most of the characters in this movie weren't that well defined, except possibly Martin.
I don't know. Tate Kuda gets a little bit.
I didn't really get his motivation. I thought that he was, I guess, conflicted because he didn't want to kill his relative, but then again, he kind of knew he was a vampire, so I just didn't... I felt like some of the actions just didn't make any sense, and maybe that's part of the satire, but it just bugged me. Like in most of the other films, as ridiculous as they are, the characters are defined and they make sense to some extent within the positions of their story.
You think so?
I think so.
Night of the Living Dead, with maybe the exception of, well, the black guy.
I think that in that film, you had a lot of characters that were basically, tearing against each other. They were in a fearful situation. It made sense in the context.
I'm not entirely sure if I would call them defined. I mean, I would call them survivors, but I wouldn't call them defined.
And they were defined as survivors, and they had tensions,
but I mean,
mistrusting each other.
Yeah, and there's a societal component in Martin.
I mean, really, other than Martin, who honestly is a very confused character, I'll say he's conflicted, he's interesting, the side characters are pretty bland.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think Night of the Living Dead's a better movie. I would still probably put Martin fairly high on the favorite Romero movies, but when you've got Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead under your belt, they're hard acts to follow.
Well, I agree with you there. I just felt like this one didn't pop. Dan, you haven't been talking for a while.
Well, again, I mean, you guys are the horror experts, so I don't have as much to compare this to.
But you did say you saw the original Night of the Living Dead. 15
years ago, yes, I saw it.
Okay.
I had to ask you if it was in black and white. Okay?
Okay, that's all right.
In terms of Martin. No, I mean, I pretty much am feeling a lot of the same things Joe is. I mean, other than Martin and his grandfather, I didn't really necessarily remember that much about any of the other characters. Do I think it was an interesting take on vampires? Yes. Like I said in my review, obviously it paved the way for a lot of vampire movies and how they are perceived to follow. But other than that, in that context, I mean, if this weren't made in the mid-70s and wasn't a groundbreaking movie for the time, I just don't think there's anything else to write home about it.
It's interesting that you keep bringing up the fact that that you consider it groundbreaking and it had influence. I would actually argue the latter. I'm honestly surprised at how little any other movie really draws reference to it, other than the fact that a couple years back they were contemplating doing a remake about it. Because I know for a long time George A. Romero was thinking about doing a sequel, but kept getting away from him.
My point is, and you said it yourself, There were a billion Dracula movies before this.
Yeah, but I'm not...
But this is a vampire movie that sort of skews the other way and doesn't do exactly what we've come to expect from a vampire. I'm not saying that everything in this movie is taken from other people and put to use. I'm just saying that this is the first time, I would guess, that a vampire movie on a large scale like this has sort of gone a different direction with it.
Which I'll agree with.
And other vampire movies have taken their cue from that and not done the typical vampire fare. That's the point I'm making.
Okay, on that I can see where you're coming from. I mean, I'm not entirely sure if it was the first. It still sort of surprises me how little influence this has actually had on the subgenre as a whole. That I think, with maybe the exception of, I don't know if you've seen this one, Joe, Near Dark.
Mm-hmm.
They usually don't go for the more human angle.
No, I like it when they do, but you're right. It's rare. I'm sure this one has more influence on more hardcore vampire
It's quite
fans.
highly regarded.
By Romero and by a couple, and by a cult following that's pretty inside, as you might phrase it.
Hey, you know what? I'm just saying, I'm sure that it has had some influence. Maybe it's definitely part of something. It's part of a movement. It definitely takes cues from those ideas. Maybe this specific film, not so much, but it probably had more influence than you think.
I don't disagree with Joe, though, that a rewatch
Could
help. This was your second time watching it, Justin.
You've had some time to ruminate.
Yeah, You've had some time to ruminate. Also, I don't know that I necessarily picked up on all the social commentary, that you found in it, so maybe a rewatch would help me discover some of that stuff as well. I don't know. I mean, I think I would prefer to watch other classic horror movies that I've never seen before rather than rewatch this, but... a rewatch may help the grade.
Yeah, I could see it again, for sure. I mean, I'd go to give it another watch.
All right, well, our final movie of the show is our Oscar A to Z, and that is The Angry Silence. This is a 1960 film nominated for Best Original Screenplay. And Joe's going to tell us about it.
Yes, I'm going to tell you about a film that I actually thought was something else, because I couldn't recall it. It's an actually early performance from Richard Attenborough, who recently passed away. He plays basically an individual who's caught in the middle of this new union strike. There's an upheaval there in the factory he works in. And in the midst of that, there's also some relationship issues. There's some romance going on. And I think that you could say there's a lot of sexist components as well. Possibly some commentary on the diverse between the sexes. Overall, I thought this film had some good performances. Had a few memorable characters. I actually think that for the time, considering it was actually in the midst of the whole communist upheaval, it was probably pretty timely. I will admit, though, despite that, I felt that the plot was a bit uneven. Like, there was the union focalization, but at the same time, I felt like there were these other subplots with the family dynamic and romances and pursuing the women that seemed like they were all over the place and underdeveloped. Mm-hmm. Like, there was one character's wife, actually Attenborough's wife, was this French woman who was a terrible actress.
Yeah, she really was.
And like that, I felt like she was just kind of a stand-in, and just felt like that were just the segues for the main plot, which was the whole strike itself, which seemed like it got bogged down and kind of lost. Really, so despite a few good performances and a few memorable characters, I admired the themes this movie was going for, but I thought entertainment-wise it was lost, and story-wise it was really a mishmash, and I would settle on a C+ for it. Didn't think it was that enjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing really wrong with the movie. It's just not all that memorable. Attenborough, who was a co-producer of the film as well, obviously does a great job. And I'm sure that back in 1960, the union thing and being on strike was a huge deal. And like Joe mentioned, it was very current for the time.
But
Hollywood has covered it so many times that I don't think that it has the impact that it would have back then at all.
It's lacking a punch. Like, it would have settled well back then.
Exactly. The themes that it tackles of, what price do we pay for our happiness and freedom are fairly classic, and this film doesn't necessarily do anything new or different with them. I thought the family romance subplot could have been taken out completely. The union stuff was really, him talking to the union leader, and
I feel like, considering that was the main plot of the movie, we got so little of that.
I know. It needed more. It's an okay movie, but it's easy to see why it has not gone down in history as one of the greats. It's a B- for me. Justin?
Conflicts in the workplace have been a frequent cinema staple, but where The Angry Silence gets a great deal of credit is in its portrayal of striking and the brutal hardships that follow. This, I would argue, was very ahead of its time for the 60s and doesn't underplay how much of a toll this ultimately served on family at the time. While the handling of the story itself flows smoothly and uses strong cinematography and lighting to emphasize its most pivotal scenes, the acting is a bit scattershot. While Attenborough is as charismatic as he was later on with the film most known from, Jurassic Park, the rest of the cast feels a bit like an array of stereotypical cliches. Street urchins, punks, kind of lesser unintelligent workers. Mm-hmm. But overall, it's a very interesting piece that was well deserving of the Academy's attention, and I give it a B.
I mean, it's one of these in the Oscar A to Z that nobody had heard of.
Nope.
You know, we were able to track it down, but it's okay. I don't know that I regret watching it, but it
is.
Was so blah. Yeah, like, it just is what it is. It exists. And like you said, Justin, it was, I'm sure at the time it was, like, ahead of its time, and what themes, but, like, they just seem so...
generic.
Yeah, generic.
By our standards, anyways.
By our standards.
The
thing is, though, I feel like there were films that actually tackled these kind of political ideas decades beforehand that were much better, honestly.
Well, in different ways, but agreed.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of movies in the Oscar slot that have been ahead of their time, either in content, language, sex, whatever. And you can sort of get the sense, okay, well, this probably stood against the best of them at the time. But it's like, even in 1960, I can't imagine that this was like, oh my God, you guys have to see The Angry Silence,
No, probably not.
So, I don't know, just kind of a blah one for our... for our Oscar docket.
I mean, it's pretty bad when I honestly thought that the synopsis of another film was
similarly
this one.
titled film.
Because I was looking at the subject matter, I'm like, okay, that's about unions. Like, what? Oh, wow.
Well, because it's even a generic title. The Angry Silence.
Could be about anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It really could be. It could be about many topics. All right, so we don't need to say any more about it. Let's end the show there. Joe, anything new on the Merlin channel?
Yes.
You just had your 900 sub special.
That's right. I actually had
great.
Some pretty cool questions, some really random ones, but I got that out there. So I'm just going to probably try and do a couple requests. If anybody lists anything off, I'll try to pick off some things fairly recent. And I'm actually thinking maybe I'll start doing some individual movie reviews again for a while.
Cool.
Maybe for with what?
Yeah, it's been a little while for those.
I think Boxtrolls might have happened, but I think people are too busy or something.
Okay. And speaking of subscribers, if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and do that. We'd love to have you aboard. And our Twitter is @FilmFanaticsPod, and the Facebook group Film Fanatics with an exclamation point. And get us your requests for Listener's Choice for Horror Month, which is, of course, October. And hopefully we'll get that on for you. And that's going to do it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. Bye!